Lionel joins us from Kiev, and he is currently on the front line fighting Russian troops.
We believe that the world should be ruled by democracies.
I was interviewing you on television a couple of weeks back.
That's right.
And you said, if you really want to understand Jerusalem, why don't you come here and see it?
And you came.
Here I am. Mass shooting after mass shooting after mass shooting. Why this cannot be fixed?
There are 425 million guns in the United States, which is more than the population.
The problem here is Trump has been able to make the argument that this is a political prosecution and that he's being singled out unfairly.
Defend our nation.
You are saying we could have a cure for cancer.
We'll have treatments for many cancers in this decade, and they're going to come from India.
Downside is that it could potentially wipe us out. But let's start with the upside first.
The upsides are absolutely enormous. The potential uses of this are almost unlimited.
I only discovered AutoGPTs about a week ago and started writing about them. And after I started writing about them, Jeff Bezos followed me on Twitter, and all kinds of crazy amounts of people have been contacting us.
The show where we get you the week's biggest stories from around this world.
What happens in the world and its nations?
South Africa.
Hi everyone, welcome to WION Live Broadcast from New York City. I'm Susan Tehrani. First, let's take a look at this hour's headlines. First cargo ship leaves Ukraine's Odessa port since Moscow's withdrawal from the Black Sea grain deal in July. The move comes amid threats from Russia that its navy would target vessels leaving Ukraine. Nigeria's junta-appointed Prime Minister Lamine Zen visits Chad, his first visit to a foreign country on behalf of the military council that seized power in July. This as the U.S. and Russia step calls for a diplomatic solution to the crisis. Russia's Luna 25 lander set to enter the moon's orbit, says space agency Roscosmos. It will revolve 100 kilometers above the moon's surface before a planned landing on Monday. Germany's cabinet clears bill to legalize recreational use of marijuana and its cultivation. The legalization would allow adults to possess and use the drug and provides momentum for a similar worldwide trend. Ben Stokes officially comes out of ODI retirement. The 2019 World Cup hero returns to England's squad ahead of the showpiece event in India later this year. Former U.S. President Donald Trump has been indicted again. This is the fourth indictment which Trump is facing less than an hour after a grand jury in Atlanta returned indictments. Democrat leader Hillary Clinton has called the development, quote unquote, a terrible moment for our country. The indictment charges the former president in a sprawling case. The 45th president was indicted after a 2-year probe into his efforts to overturn his 2020 defeat to Joe Biden in the U.S. state of Georgia. But before the charges were made public, Hillary Clinton, who was Secretary of State and presidential nominee, gave a late-night interview to MSNBC, and she said that she did not feel any satisfaction about Donald Trump's extreme legal predicaments. Instead, the former senator said that she felt great, profound sadness that the former president had already been indicted on so many charges. 75-year-old Clinton, who lost the 2016 election to Donald Trump, gave the statement during a program to apparently discuss a new essay in The Atlantic about the problem of loneliness in U.S. society. But news broke of Trump's latest indictment during the event. Clinton further added that Trump set out to defraud the country and the citizens of the United States, and the only satisfaction out of Trump's legal jeopardy may be that this system is working. She said all the efforts made by Donald Trump and his allies and his enablers to try to silence the truth, to undermine democracy, have been brought into light, and justice is being pursued. The 77-year-old former U.S. president now faces 91 charges and 4 investigations. The 4 include this one in Georgia, in New York over hush money payments to an adult film actor, at the federal level over election subversion, and his retention of classified records. Regardless of all the legal cases against him, Trump dominates Republican polling regarding the presidential nomination for next year, leading his nearest rival, Ron DeSantis, by more than 30 points. The Florida governor is at an 8% point, while Mike Pence, Trump's vice president, is at 2%. All right, for more on this, we are being joined by senior journalist Ray Locker from Washington, D.C. Ray, great to see you again, and thanks for joining us. So obviously, this interview by Hillary Clinton made headlines, and I guess the issue that many people are having was regarding what they say was her lack of awareness, considering the fact that she's made numerous excuses since she lost in 2016, taking to Twitter her supporters #resist, and then issues related to the documents as well. She allegedly had secret documents. So many see a parallel between the two and are wondering how Clinton managed to talk so much about Trump without self-awareness for herself. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, who's wondering that? I mean, her case involving her emails has nothing to do with Trump and secret documents. He took documents that he wasn't supposed to have, the law says he's not supposed to have, took them to his home, hid them in a bathroom, moved them when people were asking about it, incriminated some of his aides and all that. It has nothing to do with Clinton's use of a private email server when she was Secretary of State. So I don't find those comparisons valid at all.
Okay, and what about where Donald Trump stands right now? Regardless of these indictments, he's still polling, taking polls with a grain of salt, pretty highly among Republicans. Do you think, just looking forward, and not that you have a crystal ball, but will he become the nominee, and what would that mean for the country?
Well, I don't think he's going to be the nominee. I don't know who will be, but I think you're seeing more and more signs of strength from the other candidates. They're willing to say, hey, look, this guy didn't win the 2020 election. The election wasn't stolen from him. Mike Pence finally saying, we need somebody who stands up for the Constitution, a direct jab at Trump. And Trump is lashing out in all directions. Remember, next week's first presidential debate among Republican candidates, Trump's not going to be there. So it's a chance for other people to shine, and they're all going to take their shots at him, because I think now they finally feel emboldened that all people notice all these indictments. Oh, they say it's unfair, but they're not really doing anything about it because they don't want him around. They don't want him to be the nominee because they think he's a loser. Because he is a loser. He lost the popular vote in 2016. He lost it in 2020. They lost the House in 2018. There are no signs that this is an immensely popular candidate. He's never once had 50% in the polls. He just is not somebody who brings widespread victories to the Republican Party, despite his strength inside the party.
Yeah, it's all about the general elections. Ray Locker, great to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us on WION this morning.
Thanks, Susan.
Legal worries for Hunter Biden seem far from over. The prosecutors working on a case against him assert there is no plea deal left to fight charges against him. This means that Joe Biden's son is likely to go to trial. Hunter Biden and his team had alleged that federal prosecutors backtracked on a previously agreed upon plea agreement for tax evasion and gun charges he received in June. However, prosecutors argue that since the deal was never signed by a probation officer, it never went into effect, and none of its terms are binding on either party. The plea deal would have wrapped up the long-running investigation of Hunter Biden, with the 53-year-old son of the U.S. president agreeing to charges to avoid prison time. Under the deal, Biden was to be charged with 2 misdemeanor counts for failing to pay his taxes on time in 2017 and 2018. He was also supposed to admit to illegally possessing a gun while being a drug user and agreeing to undergo treatment and monitoring instead of more serious felony charge and possible jail time. However, Republicans argued the president's son was receiving a sweetheart deal. Last week, the Trump-appointed attorney who was overseeing the investigation, David Wise, was elevated to special counsel, signaling that the probe is expected to widen. House Republicans have been trying to connect President Joe Biden to the case against his son. The case against Hunter Biden comes against the backdrop of indictments against former President Donald Trump, Joe Biden's biggest rival in next year's elections. Pyongyang State News Agency states that the U.S. soldier who ran across the border into North Korea last month admitted that he did, in fact, illegally intrude. Travis King was heading back to the United States after a run-in with South Korean police when he snuck away to join a tourist trip to the demilitarized zone. U.S. officials have said that they believe King crossed the border intentionally and have declined so far to classify him as a prisoner of war. The state news agency said that King confessed that he had decided to come to North Korea as he harbored an ill feeling against inhumane maltreatment and racial discrimination in the U.S. Army. It added that King expressed his willingness to seek refuge in North Korea or a third-party country, saying that he was disillusioned by the unequal American society. After a drunken pub fight, an incident with police, and a stay in South Korean jail, Private second-class King was being taken to the airport last month to fly back to Texas. Instead of traveling to Fort Bliss for disciplinary hearings, King snuck away, joined a demilitarized zone sightseeing trip, and slipped over the border. July's incident came as relations between the two Koreas are at one of their lowest points ever. Diplomacy is stalled, and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has called for increased weapon development, including tactical nuclear warheads. Earlier this month, the United Nations command said that North Korea had responded to efforts to discuss the case. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken confirmed at the time that contact had been made with the North Koreans, adding that he still had no idea where King was or in what condition he was. The two Koreas remain technically at war because the 1950-53 conflict ended in an armistice, not a treaty, and most of the border between them is heavily fortified. But at a joint area, the frontier is marked only by a low concrete divider and is relatively easy to cross over, despite the presence of soldiers on both sides. Pyongyang has a long history of detaining Americans and using them as bargaining chips in bilateral negotiations. So the question is Travis King seeking refuge in North Korea, or is he a prisoner of war? The wildfires that swept across Hawaii a week ago turned one of the nation's most celebrated islands into an ashen moonscape. It's the deadliest U.S. wildfire in more than a century, and the official death toll is now at 101, a number that officials warn could double as the search continues. Firefighter crews are still battling flare-ups. Reports say the largest fire in Lahaina is 85% contained. It has burned over 2,000 acres of land. Another fire in Kula is 65% contained. and is charged by 678 acres. Now, smaller fires elsewhere are also said to have been doused completely. The fires, which started on the night of August 8th, wreaked widespread destruction in Lahaina, the city of about 13,000 people in northwestern Maui, once a whaling center, and the Hawaiian Kingdom's capital, drawing 2 million tourists a year. Seeing the situation unfold in Hawaii, U.S. President Joe Biden finally said that he will travel to Hawaii as soon as he can to review recovery efforts from wildfires that swept across Maui and killed dozens of people. Take a listen.
I've spoken to Governor Josh Green multiple times and reassured him the state will have everything it needs from the federal government. I immediately approved the governor's request for expedited major disaster declaration. That's a fancy word of saying whatever you need, you're going to get. And that'll get aid into the hands of people who desperately need it, who have lost their loved ones, who have lost their homes, their livelihoods, who've been damaged and destroyed.
Meanwhile, to pace up recovery rescue efforts, a small number of active duty U.S. Marines have joined Maui's recovery efforts. The Hawaii National Guard, U.S. Coast Guard, and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers are already on the ground, but a larger U.S. active duty response needs a formal request from Hawaii to begin the rescue operations there. The survivors of the devastating wildfires shared their harrowing stories after they returned to the burnt remains of what used to be their homes in the historic town of Lahaina.
Dios me guió, le di directo a mi apartamento y ahí estaba mi hija. La pude agarrar y vámonos, le dije, salimos corriendo. Empecé a llorar bajando las escaleras de ver la lumbre, cómo no se detenía, la lumbre venía corriendo.
Local residents said that their families lost everything in the disaster. Some even talked about how it's going to take years to rebuild and get even a semblance of normalcy to return.
First, what we're going to do is we're going to begin.
I get a chance to come back in about three days after Mass. Well, we saw everything. It was so sad, you know. It not just me lost everything, but you know, everybody. Everything is gone.
On to the world of business. Hindenburg Research has revealed a new target, Freedom Holding Corp., a Kazakh retail brokerage business. Previously, the Nate Anderson-led U.S. short seller targeted Gautam Adani, Carl Icahn, and Jack Dorsey this year. In only a few months in this year, Hindenburg's report have wiped out as much as $99 billion in wealth and $173 billion in market value from the publicly held enterprise of those business tycoons. A year-long investigation by Hindenburg published on Tuesday found, quote, a laundry list of red flags, including evidence that brokerage firm Freedom Holding brazenly skirts sanctions, appears to have quote-unquote fake revenue, and uses customer funds to make leveraged and illiquid bets. In addition, the investigation claims that Freedom Holding has manipulated the market for publicly listed shares and other assets. Hindenburg also said that review of extensive international corporate and regulatory records, interviews with former employees, and industry analysis where all the parts of the research into Freedom. In retaliation, a spokesperson for Freedom said in a statement, and this is a quote, that the publication is a speculation and a set of unsubstantiated facts. The Kazakh brokerage firm claims that Deloitte conducted an audit of its annual report and that it fully disclosed all linked party activities. Shares of Freedom fell nearly 3% on Tuesday after the Hindenburg report. And in 2008, Freedom was established in Moscow before relocating to Kazakhstan. The stock price has increased by more than 422% since its IPO in 2019. Well, the queen of pop, Madonna, is one of the most sought after, studied, and beloved musical artists of all time. And on her 65th birthday, we'll tell you all about her most iconic moments.
You know her as a pop icon, a fashion icon. But what makes Madonna so significant in the world of music and art? If you asked nearly anyone in 1981 what they imagined when they heard the word Madonna, the answer would have been of a wholly modest woman carrying a child. That perception drastically changed a decade later. By then, the world had discovered a new Madonna. A corset-wearing woman who dared to do what she pleased. Her first album, Madonna, in 1983, broke onto the male-dominated pop charts with hit singles Borderline, Lucky Star, and Holiday. Her second album, Like a Virgin, rocketed to number 1 in 1985 all over the world. Another track, Material Girl, became her nickname for years. Madonna is a cultural wrecking ball who has dared to be everything. Performer, songwriter, producer, actor, director, children's book author, muse. At a time when women were encouraged to stick to one lane, she has broken through social barriers too, using her words and her work to confront the music industry, Hollywood, the Taliban, and the Putin regime. She's 65, and that indomitable spirit has shown no sign of suppression. Earlier this year, she announced a celebration tour which was supposed to start in July. However, the tour was postponed due to a serious bacterial infection. Her fans are sure that Madonna will be able to beat this battle and bounce back in no time. Bureau Report, WION, Wild is One.
Wrapping up in the world of sports, where Lionel Messi's Inter Miami are just one step away from a maiden trophy in the club's history. The David Beckham co-owned side overcame their biggest hurdle yet in the League's Cup by beating Philadelphia Union 4-1 in the semifinals, with Messi scoring in his 6th straight game. Miami are unbeaten since Messi joined the team on a free transfer in July, but were up against a team that had lost just one match in their last 41 on home turf. Miami drew first blood when Joseph Martinez found the back of the net in the 3rd minute at Subaru Park. This was the 5th time that Miami had scored in the first 15 minutes of a match in this year's League Cup. Messi doubled the lead in the 20th minute. The Argentine captain took off near the midfield and unleashed a 30-yard stunner to mark his 9th goal in 6 games. Messi's former Barcelona teammate Jordi Alba also got on the score sheet with his maiden goal for Miami. And Philadelphia, who were unbeaten at home this season, went into the halftime trailing by 3 goals. Captain Alejandro Bedoya pulled on back for the hosts from a corner in the 73rd minute, but 19-year-old substitute David Ruiz scored Miami's 4th goal of the night to put any hope of an improbable comeback to bed. This was Miami's 21st goal since